Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and co-host of the Fear and Greed business podcast. And as always, I'm with Canna Campbell, previously a financial planner, now the founder of Sugar Mama TV, the financial literacy platform covering YouTube and podcasts and books and Instagram and more. Canna, how's your week been?
Not bad, but I want to hear about your weekend.
To say it's a weekend or even a week is probably kind of understating it. It has been a marathon of a month of decluttering around our house.
Now you're talking my language.
I know, and that's why I haven't mentioned this before now because I actually wanted to achieve it before we told you, because if I then said, hey, we're in the middle of decluttering and then we didn't do it, the judgment they would have just...
I'm the least judgmental person. Anyone knows me, I'm so relaxed. I just want to help people. I don't judge them.
Something must just happen to you then the moment you step into the studio and suddenly I just feel like I'm constantly in trouble. But no, decluttering, because we last did it probably 2 years ago. So we have had kind of 2 years worth of things just accumulating. And obviously with 2 young kids, you acquire a lot of stuff.
So much.
And so we have just been sorting through and just working one room at a time and offloading, selling anything that we can on Facebook Marketplace, etc., and just trying to get it out of our lives. Partly as a bit of a side hustle kind of thing, to generate a little bit of extra cash. But a lot of it is just almost for the mental health kind of side of it, of not living in clutter.
Suffocating,
yes.
Drowning. Yeah,
it is really
cramped.
But the feeling of suddenly walking into a room and being able to see kind of
the carpet.
Yeah, indeed. We actually have carpet there. Who knew? I mean, I think you've kind of inspired me because you talked before about decluttering and about the kind of almost the minimalist kind of approach to it. And it is great for now. I reckon about 3 weeks and it will have kind of just reaccumulated.
That's why you need to be a guard dog of your front door, because then you can stop, like mindfully and proactively stop the entering of new stuff.
Does that work?
Yeah, it does. I'm quite strict. I'm like, no, that's not coming.
So when your Amazon delivery is arriving, you're just standing at the door going,
I'm not a big shopper, and I do think about, we have so much. I'm always telling my kids, no, we already have that. We have this. You have that already, or you don't need that. I'm sound really mean, don't I? I'm depriving, but...
No, I wouldn't say that.
We're not big shoppers, so yeah.
Okay, so that makes it easier to try and...
I'm a minimalist. There you go. There's my answer. I try, if we do a declutter, the whole purpose of decluttering is not to refill my house with crap. It's to maintain it in that. So I'm quite protective of that space is what you could say. I'm trying to say. Okay. My kids have stuff. They have lots of stuff. They get more stuff than they really need or want, and they are spoiled, but I do try and take control. And it's often other people that have bought them stuff as well.
One of the things that has inspired me, along with you, to declutter is... started doing a lot more kind of Instagram stories and things like that.
You're doing I love your stuff is great.
And it's both for kind of Fear and Greed, our podcast, and also for my personal one, which is Michael Thompson, author. But what I've found is that it's impossible to find a spot to film that doesn't have stuff behind me. There are toys, there is clothes, there is just kind of bric-a-brac. There are just things in the background of every single shot. So that's why every video I do now is kind of from below my nose, because the ceiling is relatively clear.
Clutter-free.
So
funny.
Anyway, look, we've got a lot to talk about today. We're doing a topic that I don't know much about, so I'm going to be learning. This is about my financial education as much as anybody else's. We are talking about risk profiles. But before we do that, because this is something that is very much relating to investing, and so it is important that everybody understands that everything that we talk about today is general in nature. It is never personal. It is never investment or strategic or product advice. It is purely, as I said, for financial education purposes only.
That's exactly right. We don't know anything about your financial situation, your goals, your deadlines, or even what your risk profile might be, which is what we're talking about today. So should anything be of interest to you, we strongly recommend you always go and see a financial planner and ask them for personal advice based on your situation, your goals, your dreams, your risk profile, and your deadlines for those goals and dreams.
So there are so many ways to invest these days, from property and shares and kind of bonds and ETFs and crypto and all of these. There are kind of countless options, it seems, on how to invest. And so obviously that is why good professional advice is so important. But one thing that a financial advisor, a financial planner is probably going to speak to you about is your risk profile,
Yes.
kind of your appetite for risk.
Yes.
What is that and how do they actually assess that?
So they do this thing called a risk profile questionnaire. And it's a series of questions that takes you through various scenarios and asks you what would be your immediate reaction if this happened to your portfolio, or if this economic event happened and it meant you had a increase in likelihood of this happening to your investment portfolio. How do you feel in this situation? It gauges what your responses are. And you normally answer these questions with like one of, say, 5 different answers, and you tick a box, and they add the numbers up and they give you what we call a risk profile. It's where they, I guess, pigeonhole you into a certain asset class, and that each asset class gives you a guide as to how you should invest. So what's the split? So, for example, you'd probably be a balanced to a growth investor. So I would take you through all these questions and all these scenarios. You know, how would you react if your portfolio suddenly dropped 20%?
Yeah.
Because interest rates went up and there was a world event that happened. And, you would say, well, I would panic and sell everything, or I would sit on my hands and do nothing and wait, or I'd go and educate myself more, or I'd go and invest more, or I'd go and borrow more money and invest more money. Like all these different reactions.
So it's really quite psychological. I got it into my head when I heard kind of about risk profiles that it was just direct question of how much kind of risk can you handle. But it is actually more.
It's way more. And it also comes to time frame as well, because when it comes to investing, different asset classes are for different periods of time. So, for example, if someone's has a long period ahead of them, like a young person, the general rule of thumb is that they would have a stronger bias towards long-term high-growth assets such as shares, international and domestic, and property, because that's going to give them the best and biggest opportunity for long-term growth and income. Whereas if someone said to me, look, I'm saving up for my first home, they don't have that benefit of time, and that they can't go through that volatility risk that a long-term investor that has 20, 30, 40 years. So someone like that, you would say, even though you might be a high-growth investor for this particular goal or dream of yours, you need to be looking at a very conservative, minimal volatility asset such as shares or bonds or fixed interest assets.
What about the other factors that kind of go into it in terms of not just how long you have and what your goal is, but the other kind of elements that are just part of your life? Like if you have a family, if you've got kids, and if you've got a lot of other expenses, like school fees and those kinds of things, do they kind of come up in the risk profiling in that you would potentially have a lower appetite for risk because you have a lot of dependents? More so than, say, someone single in their 20s who might be a little bit more open to a bit more risk.
There are thousands of risk profiling tools out there, and I'll actually recommend my favorite one in a second. But this is where a good financial planner comes in, because that question may not necessarily be in the risk profile. I know the ones that I use, we would ask our clients, all right, what's your budget like? Is it comfortable or is it very tight? What do you need as emergency money? What upcoming expenses do you have, such as more children or a renovation or some medical expenses coming up? We'd actually go into that much detail. So a good financial planner will actually proactively know to ask you all of those questions, and then that would be factored into your risk profile, but it's maybe not necessarily in the risk profiling questionnaire itself, because the ones that are online, they're really for people who go, okay, I want to start investing. I've got X amount of dollars to invest. How should I be using this money to make sure it's diversified and in positive alignment to what I want to achieve financially?
Are there parts of your risk profile that you don't get a say in, kind of in terms of, say, you owe money to the bank or owe money to a bunch of other places, then arguably you should have a lower appetite for risk because you actually have a lot of other commitments
Not
to third parties?
Not necessarily. Okay, so that's more of a question of strategy rather than where should you invest.
Gotcha.
Because remember, your investments are long-term to help you build your wealth.
Yeah.
And this is why a good financial planner is not about where you should be investing. A good financial planner is actually someone who's going to help you with strategic advice in combination with investment advice that's all personally based to help you achieve all of your financial goals that include paying for school fees, paying off the home loan, making sure you have enough money in your superannuation to retire, building up passive income streams, legally minimizing tax, and a whole pile of other things, as well as protecting your assets and yourself. So there is a combination of risk profiling along with strategic investment advice.
Okay. All right. We'll come back in a second because I want to ask you about, once you have established a risk profile, what kind of asset classes you'd be looking at, for example, within that, just to try and illustrate this a little bit more clearly, to take it from a vague kind of low risk or balanced kind of risk to actually what does that actually mean? Okay, we're talking about risk profiles. And so really this is something that you will do with a financial planner to just try to figure out what your appetite for risk is. But it could feel a little bit vague in terms of just the word kind of risk or what you like. But what does it actually entail? Once your financial planner has said, you've done this questionnaire with them, and then they say, all right, you are
balanced.
What does that mean? Is it going to be shares?
Yes and no. It gives you a guide. So it'll say, Michael, you're a balanced investor. As a balanced investor, we would generally recommend, give or take 5% each way, that 30% of your investment portfolio be invested in Australian shares, 25% be invested in international shares, 15% be invested in property, and the remaining amount in cash and fixed interest to make up that total of 100%.
Okay. One place where a lot of people would have seen this, even if they haven't spoken to a financial planner, which they should, is probably in their super.
Yeah.
Because you always see it in the super letters that you get, and it tells you kind of where your money is allocated.
And a lot of superannuation companies will actually default you into the balanced option if you haven't actually nominated where you want your superannuation money to be invested.
Superannuation, then, this kind of goes back to the topics that we've talked about with super, that this is probably the best way for you to have a say in where your money goes in super, that you shouldn't just be treating your super as savings, as you said in a previous episode.
Portfolio.
It is an investment portfolio, and this is your opportunity to actually say, look, I've got a slightly higher appetite for risk. What does it look like in terms then of the benefit of a higher risk? You have the potential for higher growth, and then at the same time, you've got the potential for a larger
risk.
Fall.
Yes, there's greater volatility, typically speaking. So, but then with greater volatility, there are things you can do to proactively help manage that volatility, such as diversifying your portfolio, not putting all your eggs in one basket. And that's why doing a risk profile is great, because it will show you, how the right blend and mix of investments, because obviously international shares might be booming, whereas Australian shares might be struggling, and then it will flip the other way. And that's why it's really helpful, because it helps when you look at the total return of that portfolio, when you add up all the different asset classes and what each one has returned, it helps give you a smoother number. So it takes away that, or it doesn't take away, it reduces that risk and that level of volatility. So it's a lot more palatable.
We've talked a lot about treating your finances in the household as kind of a family unit kind of thing. What do you do when your partner has a different risk profile to you? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, it happens all the time, absolutely. And a couple of different things. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's like my favorite color is blue, your favorite color might be purple. Like there's no wrong or right. And it often comes down to experience and education. So, and that's why I tell people they should check their risk profile every 2 years, which is what I would always do with my clients. Would always do a new risk profile questionnaire to see if anything's changed. And 9 times out of 10, as a client of mine becomes more experienced and more educated, their risk profile will change from being a balanced to a growth investor, or go from a growth investor to a high growth investor. Or if they've had something disastrous happen, not necessarily the portfolio, but with something that's happened in their life, like a medical trauma or something outside of their control has happened, they might maybe go, look, I'm actually feeling a bit nervous, or I'm getting close to retirement. I don't feel like I need to be sitting with so much volatility. I feel like I want to take a step back and go back to a balanced portfolio. There's nothing wrong with that. You just need to work with those requirements and movements. But knowing that by doing a risk profile is very, very valuable. So in that situation where you have 2 people, One is maybe doesn't really have much experience investing. So they are going to most likely be quite nervous or conservative when it comes to approaching their investment portfolio. So they will probably come out of a risk profile being, conservative is one of the profiles, and there's various different names for it. But, their portfolio would have a higher weighting towards cash and fixed interest with only a little bit of shares.
Gotcha.
But those are the shares and the property and those high growth assets are potentially what will help create the opportunity for long-term growing passive income streams, which is what I've spoken a lot about in our previous podcast, in particular the one about the FIRE lifestyle movement. And that growing passive income stream is what's going to help you achieve your goals, for long-term sustainable benefits. Now, over time, with a good financial planner educating them, inspiring them, holding their hand, them understanding what they're doing and being actively involved, and not just following their financial planner's advice, which, a financial planner has to sign off going, I know you understand what you're doing. And that client has to be able to demonstrate that. They will then tend to kind of shift towards more of a equilibrium, you could say, with the two different profiles, and they'll end up being very similar. But in that situation, you can still do two different investments. So you might go, okay, well, John, for your portfolio, we're going to make it a balanced portfolio. And for Peter or Jill or Jack, whoever it might be, we're going to make you're a high growth investor. We can make your superannuation portfolio high growth. Mm-hmm. And then they may prefer to have their own individual investments portfolios, or they may want to go, all right, you're high growth, you're balanced. Let's meet in the middle and do a growth portfolio for your combined investments. Is
it all just about trying to increase your own understanding of what you are capable of kind of withstanding? I'm just trying to get an idea of kind of why this is so important. And it is about kind of financial literacy, and it's about just understanding where your money is going.
Absolutely. And it's funny, the amount of financial influencers I see on social media never talk about risk profiles, and they share their portfolios, which are very, very high risk with minimal diversification. They don't even realize. And there they are advising people indirectly through their content. It's like, hang on, you've got to know your risk profile before you start investing. So if you're not aware of it, you can make a very, very risky investment decision that could really backfire on you because you didn't know that that's not actually the right thing for you.
All right. You mentioned earlier that there is a particular tool that you recommend. And as you say, there's a lot of different kind of risk profile tools out there, but there's one that is worth a look.
Yes, there are thousands out there. If you literally just Google online risk profile questionnaires, a gazillion will come up. But I've looked at a lot of these, and you've really got to be very careful of the wording because they can sometimes use words that are quite misleading or lead you to answer in a certain way. So the best one I've ever come across is actually on the Vanguard International website. Now, obviously, Vanguard is a fund manager and it offers a wide range of different investments. So please know I'm not recommending Vanguard as an investment. I'm simply recommending the free risk profiling tool that is available on the Vanguard website.
Which would just be for your own kind of information, and you could take that information
and then apply the formula. So in the Vanguard question, the reason why I like it is that the wording is very clear and easy to understand. It's not leading in any way whatsoever, because sometimes they can lead you to encourage you to be more aggressive in your answer or encourage you to be more conservative in your answer. I find that this language is very balanced and fair. It's about 13 questions, and at the end of the 13 questions, it spits out a pie chart and a table, and it basically gives you a guide as to, you could literally take that as a guide and apply that in your own investing, whether it be your superannuation account or your own investment portfolio, and it can really help you see what your portfolio should be really looking at. And particularly if someone who's new and has been following financial influencers and filled up their investment portfolio with maybe high risk stuff that's, not diversified at all, this will be very eye-opening because they'll realize all the other asset classes that exist out there and how they may help, I guess, take or reduce some risk off the table, or maybe add some more efficiency to their portfolio if they're really trying to achieve certain goals by a particular time frame. But it's a fantastic free tool that I highly recommend. As I said, Vanguard as the tool, not the investment products necessarily. It's the free tool there for you.
Could you tell that this was a topic that I didn't know much about, because I have just been scribbling notes the whole time and I didn't have a single story to share about my own kind of risk profile experience, because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I've learnt.
Have you ever because you've made an investment without ever doing a risk profile?
Correct.
Maybe that might be why a lot of people go wrong. in their investment decisions.
I suspect it might be. And so I suspect I will be doing two things here, doing a risk profile and speaking to a financial planner, because it just seems the obvious thing to do because there are so many options out there. And there's so many people giving advice that may not actually kind of know what they're talking about. It just makes sense to talk to a professional who can take you through one of these risk profile tools and just help you kind of plan for your future based on your appetite of risk. And that may change. Your appetite for risk may well change. And as you say, you should be kind of checking in every couple of years and making sure that if it is evolving, that your investments are evolving with you.
Exactly. And that strategic advice factored in with that risk profile.
All right. How do people find you?
The easiest and fastest way to get in contact with me is actually through Instagram, on my Instagram account at SugarMamaTV. And it's Sugar Mama with an Italian spelling, Mamma. The other day, someone kept on calling me Sugar Mummy. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's a bit uncomfortable.
I know. I was inside, like laughing my head off. So Sugar Mama TV is the fastest and easiest place to get a hold of me. But that's also, I give you all of these swipe up access links to all of the content the moment it goes live. So, and I also give you a daily dose of financial education, motivation, and inspiration.
All right. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember to hit subscribe or follow on the podcast so that you just get the next episode straight away. You don't even have to think about it then. And you can leave us a review too as well. We always appreciate that. Next week, we are going to talk about emergency money. Basically, kind of how much you need, what you should be looking at doing with it, where you keep it, how you can generate some extra cash to put aside in the case of emergency. There's actually a lot to cover. It should be a really interesting topic. Don't miss it.